in that case, I think David will start. It's 7:33. That's absolutely fine. You can start now. Lots of people here to listen to you and watch you, Bruce. So I'd like to introduce Bruce Fox of the Ogbourne St Andrew History Group to talk about the work the group and in particular that Bruce has been leading on, in fact, on the Bronze Age Barrow at Ogbourne St Andrew, which I can't think how many years have you been doing this for now?
Um, 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And a lot of work, a lot of research has been done. So I will now turn myself off. We can hear you, Bruce. I can see you. So I will speak to you in about half an hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. The focus. Let's get this right. Just a moment. My screen is not. That's it. Sorry. Muddled keys there for a moment. Sorry. The focus of this presentation is the early Bronze Age barrow in the churchyard of Ogbourne St Andrew. The Norman church lies very close to the barrow and is a very rare survivor. The church and manorial lands have a fascinating history, and I would suggest you go to our website to see more details. Henry Cunnington dug the barrow in 1885, finding 20 or so medieval inhumations, high-status Anglo-Saxon chest burial, and early Bronze Age remains as he went in search of Viking gold. His words in his WAM report of the period. There are various suppositions about the site. It had pagan significance, was used as a motte, and sported a windmill. The bank in the churchyard was claimed to have Neolithic origins. Our history group was interested in resolving these issues and in creating a 3D image of the barrow interior. The site lies 1.5 miles north of Marlborough in the Og Valley. On this LiDAR image, the River Og is highlighted through the village, and the prominent position of the barrow above the Og is evident. The underlying geology is, as you'd expect, alluvium over chalk at the barrow. Prior investigations, there's been a geophysical survey by Oxford University in 1999, more comprehensive geophysical survey by Cranfield Institute in 2013, and then digs in the field to the west in 2015, 16, and 17. Note the previously unrecognized ring ditch to the barrow and a feature in the east paddock, and more importantly, the robbed out medieval agricultural complex to the west. The colors there, by the way, are simply due to differing resistivity levels which Cranfield were sorting out. The churchyard, the white area, is the original Norman graveyard, and from 1140 to 1888, it's a very small area, and we calculated it contains something like 5,000 burials. In 1888, King's College, Cambridge, added this area, about 1,400 square meters to the north, and this area here is where the barrow is hidden at the moment, under this photograph, under the trees. It was part of the manorial lands from 1460 to the late 19th century. The project was a community effort in 4 phases: undergrowth and tree clearance, field walk, topographical survey, and then earth resistivity tomography. Not necessarily in that order precisely, but close. Phase 1. This slide shows the clearance of 25 years of undergrowth in 2018, with more than 40 volunteers, as you notice, of all ages. Following this, Historic England placed the barrow on its at-risk register due to the dangerous state of the trees. But luckily, they also came up with a grant for tree felling and reseeding, which we gratefully accepted. Small fragments of human bone prompted Historic England to call for a field walk over the barrow surface. And again, more than 40 volunteers from the Parish History Group, Archaeological Field Group, and Gloucester Archaeology completed this just before lockdown in March 2020. There were limited finds of more human bone fragments, animal bird bones, but really very little else. It's worth having a look at this slide of the before and after shots, where the latter shot, where we've reseeded, emphasizes the apparent small size of the Barrow. And this is the bank which I'll be referring to later on, which we'll return to. So, the topographical survey underlines the prominent position of the Barrow above the floodplain of the Og. This area here, which is the called the new graveyard, clearly shows as a hollow. And again, we'll return to that a little later on, because that is quite an important feature. The close alignment of the church with the Barrow and bank suggests the graveyard uplift as the origin of the bank. The uplift from 5,000 burials will be significant, and it's noted that the church floor lies about a metre below this graveyard surface. This obviously doesn't exclude the possibility of a Neolithic origin of the bank, but seems unlikely. We would need obviously to dig to confirm this. Note the King's College Cambridge marker at the intersection of boundaries. And if very briefly we look at the 1842 tithe map, you can see the division clearly of the church, the Barrow as part of the manorial lands. It also shows buildings here in the East Paddock which are long gone. From the topographical data, we have fitted likely profiles of the original Bronze Age Barrow, with the results shown on the slides above. Cunnington and Historic England both considerably underestimate the size of the Barrow, largely due to the graveyard uplift, I think. Historic England also listed as a bowl barrow rather than the large bell barrow which we seem to have revealed. So with a base diameter of 36 to 39 metres and a ring ditch of 43 metres in diameter, a berm width of 2 to 3.5 metres is about correct. The Barrow volume works out at 1,400 cubic metres, with a ring ditch volume of 600 cubic metres. We suggest that the area to the north, i.e. the graveyard extension and the hollow shown in the topography, is the main source of the Barrow. This area is about 1,400 square metres in area, so a scrape of less than a metre would be more than sufficient to provide that volume. Phase 4 is the Earth Resistivity Tomography. Earth Resistivity Tomography, this was chosen since it gives a depth data to about 5 metres or so with the kit available. This shows Roger Harris on a very cold February morning collecting data from the line of 40 probes which run up over the Barrow. This is before some of the trees were removed, which caused a few problems in terms of laying the survey lines. Also, the site is awkwardly shaped with a problem of the steep-sided Barrow to negotiate. Doesn't look very big, but it was quite a problem. The probe positions we laid out were both north-south and east-west. Each line was interrogated to give initially a 2D image, and then these individual slices were processed into a pseudo 3D images. The lines were set 2 meters apart with a 1 meter probe separation. All the probe heights were measured by dumpy level to correct data for the topography over the Barrow. At first sight, a complicated slide, but it demonstrates the sequence of data collection which might have been of interest. The first data point is taken at probe positions 1, 2, 3, 4 at a 1 meter spacing. Current applied between probes 1 and 4 and the voltage measured between 2 and 3 give the resistance reading at that point. This has to be converted to resistivity by this simple equation, which is the probe separation, the resistance measured, and that is the resistivity in ohm meters. The second point is 1357 and so on down the list until you get to this data point 9, which is 9 meters probe, 9 meter separation between the probes. And you're now interrogating down to 4.5 meters. At this point, you go back to the start of this sequence, but instead you have 2, 3, 4, 5, and you carry on through the whole sequence until you've hit the end of your survey line. We only had 40 probes available, so we had to shift the cables forward to reach the 60 meters which we were trying to, which we actually were surveying. Very time consuming, and realistically, we only got one 60-meter line done in a day. Inevitably, there is a loss of data at each end of the sequence. Therefore, we need at least a 12-meter overlap at each end of the line and a 12-meter overlap when shifting cables. Although there's a software fix to interpolate missing data, we chose not to rely on this for reasons which I'll touch on later. The software we used to process the data was Geothermo Res 2D, a complex modeling package with a wide range of adjustable parameters. So what did we get out of it? Well, here are 3 sample slices of east-west across the Barrow, and visible are the ring ditch, a low resistivity core, and various features, for example here, and in this case the path, and here is a 1914 drain which was put in for the church soakaway. Similar slices north-south. The north end of the it runs across the modern graveyard, so the soil is very, very disturbed, and any sight of the ring ditch is lost. At 26 meters, that's a nominal from the survey line datum point, you can see the 1885 excavation trench. Interestingly, you can't see it in the 24 or 28, which tends to imply the trench was probably 4 by 4 meters across, given that that is about 2 meters. If we look a little bit more closely at the profile, as I say, all the survey lines indicated that there seems to be a low resistivity core. Note the rounded profile at about 133 meters above sea level. Now we suggest this might be evidence of a pit or dough line, a sinkhole, which is not unlikely on a chalk upland. Now we appreciate extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but without excavation, or at least coring, a deeper understanding of this feature isn't possible. Given this is a scheduled monument now set in a churchyard, permission just might be a tad difficult to obtain. Another view of the cross-section, north-south cross-section, these are the various contexts that Cunnington describes in his paper. There's the medieval level with 20-odd inhumations. We have the Anglo-Saxon chest burial at 5 feet, an early Bronze Age cremation at 7 feet, and Cunnington claimed to hit rock bottom at 11 feet. Now, the Bronze Age context he describes as one phase. We propose that the data and retained archive material in devices suggest a 2-phase event. An earlier lower mound, perhaps a beaker burial, on top of which Cunnington found a secondary early Bronze Age cremation, which would be the low table described in his report. Again, we're very unlikely to be able to get permission to dig to elucidate that. Just before leaving the 2-dimensional lines, we set down reference lines in the field to the west of the church, and clearly we were starting at along this line down here. And we have the suggestion of a spring line running directly under the church and Barrow. And interesting enough, there's an 1874 well very close to that line, and also the geophysics circular feature which Cranfield found, which on the 1842 tithe map is described as a horse pool. So indicative of there being plenty of water around, which we well know that springs in our area are very, very common indeed. So let's turn to the 3D processing. We use Geothermo Res 3D, and that permits the processing of 2D survey lines into a pseudo 3D image. The procedure is particularly complex with many variables, including both software and presentational options. In particular, we found difficulty in finding an affordable, in other words, free, visualization package to create a final rotatable 3D image of the XYZR data set of approximately 6,500 points. And we did have a look at quite a few packages. We became concerned about the software extrapolation process when examining the data produced. So a limited area was presented. This is the overlap area of the north, south, and east, west lines. It's 26 by 32. The overall data was a 60 by 60 square. We decided to go for a 40 by 40 meter area where you have extrapolated areas where you have just east-west lines and just north-south lines, and at the very extremes, virtually nothing at all. We're not at all certain that the extrapolation processes worked, so this is what we worked on, the 40 by 40 squares. And here we show the horizontal 40-40 slices of the process 3D data set at 3D data set at 1 meter intervals. Interpretation of the height of the data is not simple, and we found almost 40 possible features. And that's working between 2D and 3D output representations. We'll just have a brief PowerPoint moment. It's looking at some of the more obvious items as we go through this. First of all, the hole which you see at these lower levels is simply due to the fact that you are interrogating a 5 meter depth over a barrow. So in this area, you lose data, which is what you're seeing here. The next slide shows a scar, which is at the top of the barrow, and is probably the result of Cunnington's work in removing the Anglo-Saxon burial, or just in his excavation, because all the soil is up in the northeast corner of the barrow. The vertical anomaly feature 2 starts at high resistance, goes down for about 2.5 meters, and then changes to low resistance right the way down to the 135.5 level. Now, of course, none of these, we haven't investigated any of these features. These are just simply the geophysics results. There's a low resistivity core, which I mentioned before, and you can see that coming right the way down through until it gets lost in the data hole at the bottom. A high resistivity feature shows up between 2 levels here. And that is the approximate Bronze Age ground surface. Feature 29 is a low resistivity feature from 136 down to 134. And we think that could well be a secondary inhumation. Another feature of it is this one here, which runs from 136, again, right the way down to 133.5. And this is a modern tomb, which is on the surface. And down here, you can see graves, which seem to go down quite a way into the substrate. There's a feature here, which we've called the southern feature, and that runs from 137.5 right the way down to 133.5. So it's quite a considerable feature. No idea what that is. And again, it's a question of having to dig or core the ground to understand what's going on there. And finally, we have, I do beg your pardon. I've gone up instead of down. There we go. We have the northern feature, which is in fact a complex linear feature. I use the word linear very, very guardedly because it seems to be a mixture of features which are very close to the bank, but are not coaxial with it. They actually lie at a different angle to the bank. But it's enough to show the power of putting this together. So in conclusion, we seem to have a large bell barrow, not a bowl barrow. We can suggest a suitable source for the bulk of the barrow, from the hollow just to the north of the barrow. The presence of a low resistivity core, is it a pit or a sinkhole? Evidence of a 1885 excavation, the size and its orientation. There are probably secondary interments which we're getting sites of, and there's disturbance from recent graveyard activity, spoil. There's also the spring line running directly under the church and barrow. We found absolutely no evidence for a windmill or Motte and Bailey on the site. And the graveyard bank, we posit is more likely to be uplift from the graves than a Neolithic feature. And above all, we think that there is a two-phase Bronze Age activity, which Cunnington misapplied as a single phase. The number of people involved did surprise me when I drew this slide up. Our thanks go to all the many and varied people who supported the project, especially in those who supplied grants. They were most welcome. Thank you. If you would like more information, the ERT report will be accessible shortly on the ADS Grey Literature Library, or you can go onto our website where there's a copy, and also on that website is our updated history, which has got information about the land ownership and the history of that. And finally, it's amazing what you find in the archives down at Devizes. This was misfiled, and it's from October 1882, which is 3 years before Cunnington dug into our barrow. And what came out of the barrow? And it's dedicated to Henry Cunnington Esquire, barrow opener. Any similarities with current archaeologists, I think, are purely coincidental. So thank you for the opportunity of presenting this work to you. I hope it's of interest, and look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting talk. David, do we have any questions?
We do. I'm just seeing if I can.
And I know that one of our fellow panelists may have a question for you as well, Bruce.
Indeed. So Chris Sellen has said the potential Doline feature, never know how you pronounce that, is interesting given the spring line and therefore possible subterranean water flow.
Yeah, that's what struck us, yes. But the problem is, as I say, being a scheduled monument and now in a graveyard, chances of actually getting any permissions to go digging in there are pretty limited, I think. Coring is a possibility. Coring is a possibility. The other thing which I would comment on is the fact that when we carried out this survey, we found it extremely difficult to put the survey lines out across the barrow, and it would be ideal to find a similar sized bell barrow somewhere where there is in more open territory, more open field, where we can actually put better lines across. The snag is that the kit we've got is very, very time consuming.
We've got another question from Eric. Is this a standalone barrow or are there any others in close proximity?
We discovered a small barrow about 200 yards north, ploughed out barrow 200 yards north of this one. There's evidence of a third barrow about 400 yards away, which is a 43 meter diameter ring, in a field. It's a crop mark. There are 2 other barrows within about 500 or 600 yards. There seems to be a possibility of a small barrow cemetery, but of course the land has been so heavily used for agricultural purposes over many, many years that it's difficult to find traces of them.
Okay, we have a question from Christopher Joseph. Are you aware of any other dolin? Tell me, put me out of my misery. Tell me how to pronounce it. Features locally.
Dolin, I suppose.
Dolin, right. Well, let's agree that's what it is.
How about sinkhole? It obviates the problem.
Oh, thank you. That's much easier.
David, what was the question? Sorry.
Oh, are you aware of any other sinkholes locally?
No, and that's one of the comments that really which couple with my earlier comment about investigating other barrows, because clearly people have dug into barrows, but unless you've actually done the geophysics over them, and specifically this sort of Earth Resistivity Tomography, you're not going to know.
Can I ask if you've done geophysics in anywhere else in the immediate area that may have shown sinkholes if they were around?
Not to my knowledge. Certainly we didn't find any.
Oh, Chris Sullen says, I think it's pronounced Dolene as in Jolene. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
Okay.
Bruce, I've got a question for you. Well, one's a comment and one's a question. The comment is you say that you think it's a bowl barrow rather than a bell barrow, and the evidence suggests that. Have you thought about sending that information into Historic England, my colleagues, in order for them to change the description of the scheduled monument?
Yes, we put everything onto ADS, and so it's all there. Unless there's somebody else I should be alerting.
Yeah, that there is a process that you can actually sort of apply, that they update the record, certainly on enriching the list, which is the website, the web version, and then, but we can talk about that another time. But that would be a really good something coming out of this project, to be able to actually advance our understanding and actually change the listing if that is the case. So that would be a really good thing to do.
Well, I certainly think that listing is changing, and certainly in terms of the size, and I can understand why both Cunnington and Historic England have got it as a small barrow, because from the churchyard, because you're standing on a metre-high infill, it doesn't look very large. Go on the other side, go to the east, and you've got 4.5, 5 meters of barrow in front of you.
Excellent. No, that would be really good. We'll have a chat about how that procedure works and how that process works. The only last question for me, well, the proper question is are you thinking of doing more research in or around the barrow? Or is this the end? Is this the end?
we need to do a little bit more ordinary, so grid resistivity, standard resistivity in the east paddock, just to fill in a few gaps there. But no, we've got no immediate plans to extend this work.
Okay, and sorry, I've got 2 other questions just come in. One from Jeanette Bristow. What does the name Og mean?
Very good question. It's
either I'd say that.
It's either from Ocker, who is a Saxon with connections to the valley, or I've also seen it suggested to be Og, oak. Take your choice. I'm not sure which is which.
And from John, is there any evidence of Bronze Age habitation in the vicinity?
Not in the immediate vicinity, no. But there's been an awful lot of field systems and work done over in the Rockley area.
I think quite a lot of the area is pasture, isn't it?
It is.
Which mean that things wouldn't show up on aerial photographs and field walking and things like that.
Yeah.
So it may be there, but hidden.
Yes. Well, one of the things we're beginning to look at is the Anglo-Saxon origins of the village of Ogbourne St Andrew, and we've carried out quite a substantial magnetometry survey of a field just to the south of the church. The suspicion of something there, but very difficult to pin down. It's an interesting area. Let's put it that way.
Brilliant, David. Well, if we haven't got any more questions, I think that'll be fantastic. And just really would like to say thanks again, Bruce. Very, very interesting talk. And yeah, we look forward to seeing the report on the ADS website in the future.
It's all in. It's in their system. It should be up within a week.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Excellent.
And virtual applause from us.
Yeah. Lovely. David, are we having a couple of minutes just as a quick comfort break, or are we going straight in?
Why not? Well, you're the boss.
Oh, right. Okay. Let's just have a couple of minutes just if people need to quickly stretch their legs or go and make a cup of tea, pour another glass or something, and then we'll be back in, let's say, well, literally a couple of minutes. Let's not leave it too long. And then we'll have enough time for Katie to get her presentation up and get a glass of water or something as well. Thank you.